Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Hamid Syed, and as Sarah mentioned, I work for Underwriters Laboratories. I'm responsible for our operations in Middle East and Africa region. And today I'm moderating a very informative panel on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and we'll be talking about the challenges and opportunities. Now, just a little bit about UL Underwriters. We have been in business since 1894. It's a safety science company. Over the last several years, we have been involved in working globally to write and upgrading standards to promote electrical vehicles and infrastructure. We have also been involved in testing, inspection, and certification of EV batteries and EV infrastructures. Lastly, two of our advanced EV testing labs have been completed in Europe and North America. Now, the transition from fossil fuel to electric vehicle is taking place in Middle East, with the UAE taking a lead in it. And as you heard the previous speaker, Abhilash from Al Nabuda speak, is doing it rather aggressively. Now, this is fascinating because if you look at the Middle East region in general, this is a region where oil and gas plays a major role in its economy and also in its transportation. And that may create some interesting challenges for the EV adoption and related industries. So today we will be discussing with our distinguished speakers how we can create more opportunities, address the challenges, and help make the transition faster. Please allow me to introduce our first speaker. So the first speaker is Lilia Mezhoud. Lilia Mezhoud is an international M&A lawyer with TotalEnergies. She has an extensive experience in the Middle East and Asia markets. Currently, she is a senior project manager in charge of the development of the EV charging infrastructures in the Middle East region. Lilia's focus is on the role of public-private partnership, and we will be using the term PPP to tackle regulatory and technical challenges to accelerate the development of charging infrastructure. So, you want to come on board? You're all hooked up? Perfect.
Yeah, I think it's
great.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ahmad Abdul. Ahmed is an electrical engineer. He is also the e-mobility division lead at ABB. He's an engineer with an MBA and PhD in marketing. He has been working with ABB since 2010 and has extensive experience on product management and is currently leading the ABB e-mobility division for the Middle East Africa region. Ahmed?
Thank you.
Next, we have Ahmed Samir, and also our host. Ahmed Samir is the managing director at the Clean Energy Business Council, also known as CEBC. It's a non-profit organization dedicated to promoting clean energy and clean technologies and solutions for Middle East, North Africa region. They like that. CEBC provides a platform to further dialogue between the public and private sectors to develop much needed policy and regulations to help drive the implementation of clean energy across the MENA region. And then we have Nasir Shamsi. He's the managing director for sustainable transport projects at the BIA Group. Nasir is a dedicated professional with over 16 years of experience in government and semi-government sectors, and is an expert in the automobility telematics, ranging from electronic vehicle software to automation and sustainable transport solutions. Within his current role, Nasir is responsible for managing ION, which is the region's first commercial green transport company, formed as a joint venture between the BIA and Crescent Enterprises. Nasir has actively worked with the company's senior management to implement multimodal mobility solutions through ION, deploying a unique green fleet management enterprises within the UAE. Thank you, everybody, and welcome. So I have, in order to prepare for this meeting, I was looking at some research. And I'm going to read the first research that I did, which says in the US, competing standards have led to many electrical vehicle stations being unable to service more than one type of vehicle. And as a result, what's happening is drivers are using the map, arrive at an EV station, and they find that they cannot charge their car because it's not compatible to their type of vehicle. And also there's a lack of open access to charging data that has meant that several EV services end up advertising incomplete or outdated information about their service stations to the drivers. So that's causing more of a chaos. So, Nasir, I'm going to ask you the first question. What do you think are the current regulatory challenges for EVs across the MENA region in terms of standards for EVs and EV chargers, regulations, awareness, etc.?
Thank you, Syed. Thank you all for having me here today. I think it's mainly due to there is no clear path where the EV infrastructure is being deployed, at least here in the UAE. You know, recently I've seen vehicles being sold from China, for example, and they do have different type of standards. They are currently using the GBT standard, and that's not even complying with our standards, the so-called standard. I wouldn't say, because we don't have any standards yet. You know, as you might be aware, that the UAE is following the metric system, and the metric system has the Type 2 standards, the CCS standards, CHAdeMO maybe, but when we see some vehicles being imported from China, from let's say the US they have a Type 1, Level 1 chargers that don't comply with what we have in the region, which makes it very difficult for, let's say, investors. When they invest in building a charging infrastructure, it makes it really difficult for them to decide on what type of standards. Think of it of what is happening right now with the mobile phone industry. We have mobile phones that are on in the case of iPhones, they have a lightning adapter. The European Union is putting a lot of effort into forcing the Type C adapters that would be standard, and this is what we hope as not only consumers or governments, but also countries, that at least there is a clear standard that will enable other investors to start building these type of charging infrastructure in the region, making it accessible, making it affordable, making it seamless.
Right. Thank you, Nasir. Ahmed, Samir, can I ask you the same question that I asked, just to refresh the question? So the regulatory challenges for EVs across the region, in our region, in terms of standards for EVs and EV chargers, regulations, awareness,
sure.
etc. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Just to give some context, I think Hamid gave a little bit of introduction about what we do. I represent the Clean Energy Business Council, or CEBC. We are, in a nutshell, a not-for-profit membership association that is present in the UAE, but we cover the Middle East and North Africa region. And we are essentially a platform that connects the private and public sector. So our daily activities is basically to understand the challenges the private sector is facing and what the government is doing. And so we have some internal discussions. We understand a little bit of things that are not publicly available. And that gives us an insight on what to expect and where the market is going. So going back to your questions, I think what we see generally is there is a positive movement across the region. The government actually understands the potential for EVs, and that's just recently. And when we tell this to the international players, they are somehow surprised, because you have some of the top oil-producing countries and exporting countries across the globe are from the region. So the fact that you have this oil-producing and exporting countries are actually adopting and encouraging EVs, it's something that people will be surprised to see. So that's the positive news. And the fact having this event now opened by the minister and having that number of vehicles being launched, it just confirms this point as well. But if we go practically, what are the actual changes we see now? We don't see a national, the first point, which I think is the key point, there's no one single country across the region that has a national strategy for the adoption of EVs. With all the points under this, we see some initiatives from some government entities, and you'll be surprised sometimes those government entities are not actually speaking to the other government entities. So it's actually just an independent government initiative to achieve specific targets that don't feed into the government targets. So I think the key point is to have a national plan, and that doesn't only apply to e-mobility, but all of the clean energy strategy. And I hope that will happen soon. We see some announcements because of some global commitments. You can see COP27 and COP28. So they have to, but what's the actual practical plan that's going to be implemented with the time, with the roadmap? That doesn't exist yet in any country across the region. Egypt announced last week their climate change plan, but if you look at the details, it's very loose. There's nothing that companies can actually see and accordingly decide this is a country that we should invest in. So I think that's the key point. And everything basically falls under this, what are the standards and why these standards were put in place. So because you don't have a specific target that the different entities within the government have to achieve, so every single, and sometimes even you go into a country and you don't know who is actually responsible for putting the specific standards for the EV charging. So you don't know who to speak to. So you are an investor and you go to the government who should actually be adopting and trying to help you, but they don't know who you should speak to. So that's a big challenge. So I think it has to start from the government national strategy, and especially given that we have even some of the countries in the region are encouraging the manufacturing. So it's not really to adopt fleet or end users, you're also building manufacturing facilities, which means it's a must even to have these national strategies and make sure that everything is very clear for everyone. There's no one single investor who will come from the US or Europe and invest in a country that doesn't understand who to speak to and who are the reference points when you speak to different points. The other point is the region has many countries with big populations in some cases, but you have segmented markets. So there's no one key player that will actually customize the product to fit in one specific small market. So I think the need to have a harmonized, so we were speaking about the point whether it's unified or harmonized standards across the countries. So we need to have harmonized standards across the countries, whether for the EV and more importantly for the EV charging as well. And the investment to make sure that the EV charging is actually adaptable or suitable for every single country. That is huge time investment and money investment as well, which I think is not justifiable for international investors as well. The third point is the lack of awareness about what's happening in the region. I think the fact there's so many people coming in the audience even from outside the region, so hopefully you'll engage in the different discussions to understand the dynamics of how the region works. There's so many opportunities, but you have to come and understand how it works, and accordingly you'll find so many opportunities. And I'm happy to connect you if you would like to explore further opportunities. Happy to, there's so many people looking for investments, so many people have investments and looking for projects to invest in. So if you're in any of these categories, we can speak after as well. So that's my key 3 points, if I may.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, much appreciated. Listening to Abhilash, who did the previous speaker, he was talking about the different topics related to EV infrastructure, including the charging times, charger compatibility, grid capacity, etc. So, Ahmed, I'm going to ask you this question, Ahmad Abdul. Next question is, so what are the current and future technical challenges for EVs and EV chargings globally within the region? And any solutions that you can think of as well?
Thank you very much. I'm audible, right? Okay, very good. So these two questions, first question, second question, are very much related and they are completing each other. I hear Nasir and Ahmed, they already cover majority of the points, and the technical, or let's say the obstacles we might see in the market, it's not only a technical obstacle. One of them which you mentioned from this report, that we need to look at grandmother level, who's driving her car, going to the charger and discover that whatever she sees in front of her is not matching with her car. So she failed to do the task, why she's going there. So on a simple level, as you said, when you go to any petrol station, you never ask if this nozzle is matching your car or not. You're 100% sure, you need only to select what type of petrol you're using. Yeah. So you don't know what is the dimension of nozzle or what is the dimension of your tank, it's a plug and play. So here where we are facing some problems where from investor point of view, you need to understand what should I invest in? Which type of standard should I follow? Which type of cars will arrive to my market? Should I keep chargers for all standards and start to play the game of guessing, okay, I might receive these cars or not? So this all delaying the investment decisions in the market. So on the non-technical part, one of them is the standard, clarity on the vision of the country, which Ahmed was touching. We need to look at the charging situation as end-to-end. At the end of the day, this is a business. Investors are coming to generate money. He needs to have a clarity on his ROI. He's investing a lot to have this infrastructure happening. He needs to find a very good location, which is a lot of money. He needs to invest in a very good quality charger, so it doesn't break, it doesn't have problems with the cars, it fits all the cars, keep updated with the new technologies or new updates on the software level, and availability of power. So all these points is money, money, money. So if I don't have a clarity how much I will sell, what's my profit, I'm able to put a lot of commercials around the chargers or not. As you say, the time of the charging, let's say that my customer will stay 30 minutes in this area charging. What he will do in this 30 minutes? I need to get a benefit of having this kind of customer, offer him a drink, food, or whatever. So again, end to end, we have to look at the solution and we have to see how to support this investor. One of the challenges every investor have, whom I will compete with. If I will compete with a kind of a monopoly, a government board will come and say, no, I'm the only one to sell electricity, I'm the only one to supply chargers, you have to work under me. So these activities make the investor a little bit hesitant to go inside such a market, where we need these chargers before the car arrives. So the question is, the egg or the chicken? No, we know very well. You need to have an infrastructure so you can have a car. This is why majority of car manufacturers are rolling out their own infrastructure to serve their customers, just to roll the ball, And in the future, everyone will be motivated. Yes, there is a market, there is a clarity on profits, and I can work more. Another point is the regional alignment. If we look at our region, GCC, I see our friends here from Saudi also attending. So driving habits here, customers are driving from Emirates to Oman, from Saudi to Oman, from Oman to Qatar. So this long distance driving by car, it's a habit for our customers. So unifying the standards also on a regional level is needed. Yani cannot be, for example, Saudi is adopting a standard and Oman is adopting another standard, and the driver in this case will not be able to do whatever he is willing to do. So unification cannot be only between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. No, we need to look at the region. Maybe the GCC as a first step, and in the future we look at maybe the whole Middle East and the North Africa.
Ahmed, thank you. Those are some excellent points you made. I really appreciate that. So moving on, if you look at, just to build up on what you said, Ahmed, if you look at the Middle East and Africa electric vehicles market, that was valued at $35 million in 2020 and is expected to grow to 84 million by 2026, which is approximately 15% CAGR, if you calculate it from 2021 to 2026. The interesting thing is that people from outside the region, they look at us and say, man, you guys have 365 days a year of sunlight. So it should make investing in electrical vehicle infrastructure a no-brainer, because it's from their perspective, it's almost guaranteed return on investment. But because some of the things that Nasir, Ahmed, Abdou, Ahmed, Samir mentioned so far, is that some of the challenges is limiting that investment, and it's also fair to say that the revenue from the end users is not enough to support the cost of infrastructure. So with that preamble, in order for Middle East Africa to catch up with Europe in the adoption of charging infrastructure, what are your thoughts on public-private partnership to tackle regulatory and technical challenges to accelerate the development of charging infrastructure? And Lilia, I don't want you to think we forgot about you, so I'll give the first question first to you, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The public-private partnership, I will refer to it as the PPP. Okay, so it's a tool that the government may deploy in order to provide infrastructure services by using eventually, the resources from the private sector. When we say using the resources from the private sector, we are talking, of course, about the know-how, we are talking about the expertise, we are talking about the innovation of the private sector, as well as the financial resources of this private sector. Implemented under the right circumstances, this PPP can be a very strong and impactful tool which can help the growth of an economy of a country. And the PPP today in the UAE is widely used, and it can have several legal forms. It can be a joint venture, it can be a construction contract, and it can be a BOT, and so on and so forth. Just to go back to our topic, which is the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, today it's clear and it's obvious that a robust infrastructure is a key and it's a vital for the development of the EV sector. Of course, those infrastructure, charging infrastructure represent a lot of opportunities, but it has also some challenges. One of the main challenges is the lack of large-scale investment. It can be also the construction risk, and it can be also the uncertain profit for the private sector. So how the partnership between the public and the private can tackle those challenges. For example, if the government is the sole and exclusive investment body in this infrastructure, it will be a burden for the government, and it will put a lot of pressure on the local finances. But furthermore, establishing, operating, maintaining an infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, is not only raising funds. So the government, it's not supposed to be specialized in managing, in operating, and in the managing efficiency of this infrastructure. And this is from a government standpoint. From the private sector standpoint, we cannot imagine the implementation of a solid and of a viable infrastructure without coordination and without involving the government bodies in charge of the smart city planning, intelligent green building, and an intelligent transportation layout. So there must be a coordination and there must be a systemization between those government bodies and the planning of this infrastructure. So this is how we see the combination of private and public. A lot of countries has adopted the PPP in order to boost and in order to foster the development of the electric charger infrastructure. US, a lot of countries in Europe, but the main example is China. Between 2015 and 2016, China has issued more than 10 regulations and 10 policies in order to improve and in order to foster the development of the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. It is not just a general policy related to the PPP. It's policies targeting the PPP in the charging infrastructure. So this is a case study of China, and we think, and I really think that the partnership between the private sector and the public government and the public bodies would serve the UAE goals and agenda in implementing a sustainable and competitive economy based on knowledge, expertise, and diversity. And it's really the integration of effort, of know-how, of expertise of the public sector and the private sector as well.
So essentially what you are saying is that the government should make it more attractive for private sectors to invest in this.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they can do that by several means that everybody has talked about so far. Nasir, if you don't mind, I would also be interested in getting your take on this particular topic.
Thank you. I think, I mean, most of it was touched already by Lilia here. Governments should not, I don't think governments are really interested in investing. When you look at a city, for example, from a bird's eye view, and cities or governments or municipalities, they are generally owners of assets, but they don't necessarily invest. And for a growth to happen in, let's say, in the EV space, that PPP should be implemented. I look at an example of from BS Group as an example. As you might be aware, that I'm the managing director of the sustainable mobility within the BIA Group, and we've seen this PPP. What sort of benefits it would normally bring to a city. BIA had started back in 2007, and since then, BIA had turned around the whole waste management system within the Emirate of Sharjah. We started with we have a startup called Ion Mobility, and currently we're operating the largest fleet of autonomous shuttles, where we have deployed a lot of charging stations around the UAE. And we've seen with all this experience that we have gained by operating and partnering with governments, it's really mandatory. As an owner, or let's say as governments, they will look at their investments as a quick turnaround, and as many are aware that the charging infrastructure business is a long-term play. And are they interested? Because the more the charging stations are on the ground, the more they require operation. It's a headache for them. And I think the best mix is when you have the governments who are owning the assets, owning the grounds, owning cities. They partner with technology providers that will bring the latest technology, bring the right type of standards into cities, because I don't think it's in their best interest. They regulate cities. They are not into developing cities.
Right. That's a very good point. So government's job is to facilitate the regulations and other assets under its control in such a way that it makes attractive for private investments to invest in the EV infrastructure. Great.
Stimulation of the
right, absolutely. Okay. So Ahmad Abdul, if I may ask you, so with these challenges are also opportunities. So what are the opportunities you see across the region, and why so?
If we mean by opportunity, what else could be added value for the economy was the adoption of EV cars, which I look from this point of view is the e-mobility topic is a completely new topic end-to-end, and it's generate a different type of services, different type of understanding. We see now many countries in the region are taking the chance that these new cars, which is not internal combustion engine cars, it's completely new production line. We see all the European manufacturing are having a dedicated production line for these new cars. So it's a golden opportunity for our regions to start thinking of why we don't have our own manufacturing locally. They will start something from scratch. We have a very low cost and talented, experienced workers. We see Saudi is adopting now one of the biggest manufacturing for one of the big brands. Egypt announced opening already a factory to assemble a new car, 300,000 cars over 5 years. We see Morocco, they have their own now. Two of the biggest international players are investing there to have their electric manufacturing in Morocco. So a lot of opportunities will happen in this market. We hope to see the same in other markets. A lot of new services are coming in joined with the manufacturing. We are talking about completely new infrastructure, upgrading to the power, upgrading to all the locations. We are not talking about now the oil and gas sites. A charging solution will be everywhere, will be in malls, will be in offices, houses, on the highways. So we'll be touching all the, let's say, the infrastructure of the country. It means, again, pushing the economy where we know there is a kind of a slowdown now happening. Also, another opportunity for non-oil countries, which they are relying on importing 100% of their oil, a big reduction on the importation because of shifting to this non-oil applications. And one of the big points we can see is the reduction of the pollution. Our region is not an industrial region, and the majority of the pollution contribution we have is coming from transportation. So public transportation, and which is not very common in majority of countries.
It will start in just a moment.
We rely mainly on private drivers. There is complete countries without infrastructure for public transportation. Everyone is using his car. So if we say that coupling the e-cars with finding clean sources of electricity generation, these both together could be a big instrument for improving the quality of the air and achieving the targets of reducing the greenhouse gases, which everyone signed in the last Paris, and we see COP in Egypt, the next COP here in GCC. So this will help also, this is one of the key opportunities to improve our, or to reduce the greenhouse gases. So many opportunities around the topic. It's not only the e-mobility only.
Thank you, Ahmed. So Ahmed, Samir, I'm going to ask you and Nasir the next question, given your day job, you know. So what would you be, so far, based on all the discussions that we have had so far? So Ahmed, let me ask you this first. What would your recommendation be to policymakers and investors and end users, etc.?
I think they know what needs to be done. They
I'm sorry?
I think they already know what needs to be done. I think they just need to get it done. It's very simple. Other countries have done the homework. So just basically taking these takeaways and get things done. EVs, the good thing is sometimes when you are late, you are missing a lot, but you're also getting the advantage of just learning from the mistakes of other countries. And luckily we have, even in this conference, like this 35, like only the speakers are coming from 35 countries. Most of them are policymakers. We're just trying to facilitate the dialogue between those and our local policymakers to educate them. But just if I want to briefly mention a few points based on the discussions we have, it's basically we don't see where e-mobility fits within the national, even the governments that have a specific mandate to, whether it's net zero 2050 or 2060, there's no specific idea on where mobility actually fits within this. And you don't see accordingly, even the tenders you see out, it doesn't fulfill or doesn't feed into the whole national strategy. So I'll go back to the main point I actually mentioned earlier. It has to be the government level, very clear strategy what needs to happen. The second point is the government itself doesn't actually have awareness around what is an EV. So you might see a policy, without mentioning names, I don't know, but you might see a policymaker who's actually putting the strategy for e-mobility and he doesn't drive an EV. He never tried an EV. So it doesn't make sense that you have a policymaker trying to push EVs and he doesn't know how does it feel to actually drive an EV. So what's the motivation in that case? So it has to really be from inside, otherwise it wouldn't be on the paper, and it wouldn't be in the laws as well. The second point is governments have to lead by example, and I think we have seen this in some government entities in the UAE. You have actually to electrify your fleet. You don't have to invest in the infrastructure, but electrifying the fleet itself it's not now more expensive, it's even economically feasible, more economically, and you don't have to buy. Like there's a lot of companies that provide you alternative ownership models. You can lease, you can subscribe, there are many different models as well. So the time that actually, if you have the fleet, even the luxury fleet of the governments that's being electric, and I remember without mentioning the event again, there was an event back in Jan, and it's supposed to be a climate event. And everyone was coming in BMW 7 Series because BMW was the sponsor for the event, but they also have EVs, and everyone was also flying in helicopters. And it was a climate event. So it really has to be from inside, the motivation has to be from inside. And I think there's a lot of homework that has to be done on the very high level of the government. And when we say this, we say it because we want the good for everyone, for the whole country, and we understand the good intentions, but it has to really come from inside, then we will see it easily outside. We actually might complain about the speed of it if it's coming from inside. Like if the government really believes in this, we might complain that's too fast, please slow down. So I think that's where we want to be, and that's where in some cases that it was the case, where actually industries were sitting down with the government. You need to actually slow down the adoption because we can't fulfill the demand. So at one time, hopefully we'll get to that stage. At the same time, there has to be awareness campaigns for the end users as well. Like if you look now at the UAE, you have more infrastructure available than the number of cars. So but the challenge is the unequal distribution. So you might have the vehicle, but there are some charging stations that no one almost is using them because they are not in a location. And that's also links to the when you put the infrastructure. I tried to count how many times government and infrastructure words were mentioned by my colleagues. I lost count after 100. So governments have to intervene to make sure that the locations of the charging stations are strategically located. And we have so many companies, even here at the conference, who actually only specialize on where you should put your charging infrastructure, because you don't want to put the investment and no one is using them. And you don't want to put the infrastructure, and this would be a barrier, not the availability, but the convenience. So I don't want to drive 30 minutes just to go to a charging station that's not located within my house, etc., etc. Faris is pointing about money. I think it's the pricing of the electricity, maybe. So Faris has the clients. So just being very smart in how we locate the infrastructure is a very key point as well. So to summarize, has to come from inside, really believing in this. And I think this is a good start. This event is really fully supported by the government. All of the agenda was heavily pushed by the government. So I think that's a good start, and hopefully we'll see this across the region as well.
You know, I have to share this anecdote with you. I was reading this is a trivia. So one of the inventors, I think his name was Hero, he's credited for inventing a steam engine in 1750 or 1850, I'm not sure. But there's an old document that showed that the great library of Alexandria in Egypt had the technology of a steam engine in 3rd century AD. But it never picked up, because back then the slave labor was much cheaper than to create a steam engine. And I think to your point, I think if the price of fuel increases, then that will be more incentive for people to invest in EV as well.
Yeah.
But Nasir, I would love to have your thoughts as well, given your background in both government and semi-government sectors.
I mean, look at this event. I mean, I see a lot of electric vehicles. Now, from a government's point of view, how would this type of adoption, increase if we don't have not only sufficient charging stations, but adequate ones, the gold standard, if the government is to do, let's say, a market research, and whether this should be part of their national agenda, the first question would be, why doesn't, let's say, X, shift to, getting an EV instead of a gasoline vehicle? Let's keep the the locations. Let's assume he just have a charging point at home. But being on the road, let's say 70% of the time, I'm sure this EV user would want a like-to-like experience, especially him coming from, or her coming from driving a gasoline vehicle. And typically you would go to a gas station, you'll fill up with your car, 5-10 minutes maximum. And I'm sure the same user is having that challenge. It's like, I need a like-to-like experience. Who's going to give me that like-to-like experience? And this is why, at least, from knowledge, from experience, I think the gold standard here is having adequate amount of DC chargers over AC, because AC, if you do a ratio, AC is mainly, meant for officers or long-term, office hours or at home. But I think on public roads, it has to be a DC charger, because that's when the users will do a top-up. A top-up, let's say 10, 15 minutes, and back on the road. I think this is what the government needs to focus on, and they should encourage. I hate to mention this, but I always look at Dubai as an example. Why is always Dubai ahead of everyone? Because Dubai itself, Dubai government is a company. If you look at Dubai is a company by itself. So they don't have those government structured bureaucracy, and Dubai government by itself is a company. So they're operating as a company. That's why it's always ahead of everyone else when it comes to implementing. And there's no, I don't see a reason why, if you fail in something, you don't need to be shy about it. I look at ADNEC, for example. Back in the day, a few years ago, when they started introducing the self top-up, and they started charging people 10 dirhams, or if they opt for not self top-up but by the technician there, they knew that it was a wrong decision that they made. They started charging people for it, but there is no harm in trying. Sometimes you may not find answers. Yeah. So it's better that you try by itself, and it's not. I don't find it wrong. Plus, it's a good learning for you. And this is what I would want. I encourage government to listen to everyone, not only users, but as well as investors. That choosing the right and adequate type of charger is the way forward.
That's a great point. That reminds me of the anecdote of Thomas Edison said when he was trying to build that light bulb, he learned 150 ways how not to make a light bulb because that's how many times he failed before he succeeded. Okay, we are almost at the end of our time. So I have one question for Ahmad Abdul for you. What would you recommend, if you look at Dubai, right? I live in Dubai. There are some people who live in the villas, private homes. They can have AC charging. So in my building, there are 5 floors of parking, and I don't have any, there are no charging stations. And a few friends that I have, they say that, hey, listen, if there was a charging station in the building, they would switch to EV, to the points that all of you have made. Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for the building owners or the municipality or anybody to incentivize them to build charging stations in apartment buildings?
Again, I would like to look at the bigger picture. How the user, as Ahmed said, that sometimes the decision makers, they didn't have the real experience to be a EV car driver, and what exactly in the mind of the EV car driver. Some things we consider as a basic, we never think about it, because when, for example, when using your standard car, you never bother or you never think when I will charge my car, or where I will get oil. You know that maximum in the range of 5-10 kilometers, wherever you are, there is a station. So You can drive easily without planning, without thinking. You can go anywhere, get fuel, and continue your trip. You know everything is unified. You don't bother what is your charger, what's your standard, nothing. But when you go to the EV life, where majority of the adopters now, we call them the early adopter, the people who would like to try the newest technology, they have challenges on where I'll charge my car, how long I will be able to drive the car now. So let's say statistically that 90% of the car performance, or let's say that the car is 90% in parking situation. You drive the car 10% of its lifetime, let's say it this way. So this 90%, we have to think how to use it to charge the car. So where should I charge my car? If we look ideally or on the books, they will tell you that the best time to charge your car is at home. AC chargers are 90% of the charging in the future. But this is having some challenges when we go to our markets. Don't look only on Dubai or on your own building where you have a dedicated parking, or sometimes not even a dedicated, could be a shared parking, but you know that more or less you'll find a place to park your car. But majority of people doesn't have a dedicated parking. Either they park in the street, they park in an empty land beside their building. Not only in Dubai, go to Sharjah, go to Saudi, go to Egypt. So this is a very common issue. Even if I have a car and I got a charger for free from the manufacturer, where I'll install it? And who will charge me for that? If I go to facility manager, the operator of the building, the maintenance company, he will tell me I don't have enough, maybe I don't have enough power, maybe I don't even have power in the location you are parking. This is if you have a parking. And if you don't have a parking, like when we see Jordan, for example, they have many cars and they don't have a place to charge their cars. So they rely more and more on the DC fast chargers in the stations, or sometimes you see cables hanging from a building or apartment charging my car to serve the need. So we are sure that in the future, there will be a kind of a new services to adopt with this kind of requirement that I have a car, but I don't have a dedicated parking place. And we are pretty sure that there will be more demand for public charging. Could be office charging, could be malls charging, restaurants, or relying on highway charging or petrol station or oil or energy supplier chargers. So this idea of relying only on the house charger will not be applicable for everyone. And also it's changing based on my driving habit, how long I'm driving my car. Is it I'm driving per week 500 kilometers, so I can charge once or twice a week, or I'm a taxi driver or a fleet or delivery truck, delivery car, which drive could be 400, 500 kilometers every day, no problem, it's normal for him. Where I'll charge my car? So we are looking on a bigger picture of fleet management. I need to find, again, standard charger to charge my car regardless of where I will go with this car. For the typical house application, there is the new installation, let's say, or new buildings, new villas, new compounds. This is the easiest part. We can easily teach consultants that, guys, you have to consider this in your planning, that you need to prepare your location, for example, 10% of your parking to be green parking for e-cars. We tell them this is the needed power, communication. So they prepare it could be 5% ready now, 10% or 15% for future extension. This is the easiest part. But the challenge is on the brown field where already buildings are existing, could be power is limited, could be no enough space for this installation. So we take it a case by case, usually with the facility manager, because at this time, I cannot give the privilege to every parking owner to install as a charger. More or less, they will go for the concept of a public charging. I will install 5, 6 chargers, and I'll keep it public, maybe by reservation, by subscription. So we will see more and more the role of the operator. It's not only a private or individual user, but someone is able to operate, to charge money, to facilitate the services, to see the demand of the power, because you have a limited availability of power in majority of time. And this is why in ABB we are investing a lot, not only in the hardware, not only on safety and the operation, but also on the software, back-end operation, energy management, looking to use the available power like vehicle to grid or vehicle to home, Because car at the end of the day is, let's say, a bigger power bank. It's a battery which have power. You can use it in emergency. You can use it in cheaper, you can charge at cheaper tariffs. In some countries, there is tariff based on time, not only on usage, but only on time. In the afternoon, it's big, so it's high tariff. At night, it's lower tariff. You can charge at night, use it at in the morning, for example. So all this is, again, a big picture of the e-mobility or EV charging experience for customers and for governments.
Thanks, Ahmad. Appreciate that. So please stay here. Don't go away. We are almost finished with our panel discussions. I'm just going to summarize. Then I have one last question for all of you. Same question for all of you that our audience may be interested in listening. So to summarize, everybody agrees that the electrical vehicles, there will be more electric vehicles on the road if there is infrastructure to support it. People want reliable and more EV charging stations that are reliable and available when needed. The harmonization of standards across the region will help investment by the public-private sector, and private sectors can bring expertise, innovation, and resources, financial resources, to help build the infrastructure that will support more EVs on the road. And the government should be able to use its assets like land, et cetera, to encourage the private sector and the investors so they know that this is a safe investment. So that's in a nutshell what we discussed. Now, before we officially end this, one of the experts believed that it was year 1910 when there were more cars on the road than horses. Okay, so the question I'm going to ask all of you is, what year do you think there will be more electric vehicles on the road than fossil fuel or traditional cars on the road? So, Lilia, first, you. There's no right or wrong answer, right? I mean, this is just a,
Okay. See, I mean, it's clear and it's obvious today that there is a strong willingness of the government to, and all the governments around the world, I mean, to adopt a completely decarbonized transportation path and scheme. And we see also the aggressive targets of the OEMs and the OEMs coming with the entire ranges of electric vehicles. So, I don't know, maybe, 2030 it will be a little bit optimistic, but
pick a year.
I believe that it should happen between 2030 and 2040. So I don't know what's the year, but yeah.
You're kind of cheating because you're taking 10 years.
2038 maybe?
I'll give you 2030 to 2040. Ahmed, Samir?
Yeah, I think it's conditional. It's once the government decides to make it happen. There's no year. If they decide today, it would happen today. And
throw the right dice, man. Come on.
The other point is once the people change their lifestyle, majority of the EV owners in the UAE and the region, actually, it's not their first car, it's their second. How many people have EVs in the audience? How many of you, it's your first car? Because you have 2 EVs. So 3, right? 4? More?
Okay.
So it's only one who's using it, and he's not using only one EV. He's an EV enthusiast and passionate. Okay. So that's one. It's a change of the mindset, a change of the lifestyle, and that's anything with climate change. People have to change their lifestyle. It will not happen just because it's a nice gadget. So I just want to try it. So there's a very interesting study about this region. So there's something called car pride. So basically how people judge each other based on what transportation mode they use. And it was done by MIT. And they rank the countries according to the car pride score. So which country you think is the first country in the car pride? It's not UAE. It's an African country. I don't think you'll get it. It's Kenya. So Kenya, if you drive a car, you're in a specific social category. If you use public transportation, you're not exist. If you drive a Porsche, it's different from you drive another car. So people actually see, they judge and treat each other based on what car. So the second one is UAE. and the third is Saudi, and Egypt like the seventh one. So without it changing that mindset and lifestyle, I don't think it will happen. So I will not give a year. It's just conditional. Government needs to think it has to happen, and people need to change their lifestyle, and it will happen naturally.
You know, there are no penalties to pick a year, but just for the audience, you know how you can tell somebody is an engineer? If you ask them a question, their response will be, it depends.
I'm an engineer.
Fair enough. Nasir, what year do you think?
Again, I can't specify a year, but I can give you a calculated guess, because if you look at the trends, let's say major manufacturers are towards banning the sale of ICE vehicles, and the majority of them will stop, will start banning them by 2030. I think it would be in the range, and looking at the adoption rate of what the UAE is doing, or at least the region, between 2040 and 2050, but impossible earlier than that. Because if you look at today, I think, if I'm not mistaken, as per the last statistics I've seen, I think from the total sales of vehicles around the world, maybe the electric vehicle contribute to 1% of the total sales. So I don't see it anytime soon without having any sort of, let's say, ban somewhere. Otherwise, people, they still like the sounds of the engine, they still want an engine, because they still believe that, with an electric vehicle, my main hurdle was being in a charging station for such a long time. Until, you have a mix of solutions where, you have ultra-rapid solutions, then you have, subsidies by the government and enforced by the government, and they start charging you in some cases with, driving a gasoline vehicle that is affecting or polluting the environment. Other than that, I think it would be somewhere in between 2040 and 2050.
All right, fair enough. Nasir, thank you. Ahmad Abdul, short answer, because you're the last guy before we open for any questions from the public.
For the countries which have a clear announcement
no, just in general.
On the targets, it's 2030.
2030?
Yes, for others who will follow, it will be 2050.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. That's very interesting. I guess it's just anybody's guess when this will happen, but we will all keep our fingers crossed. I don't have any more questions for all of you, but please stay here in case there are questions from the audience for any of our panel speakers. Any questions from the audience? It's always tough to be the first one.
I think we did a good job.
Please, sir, you can get up there.
Usually you either fully agree or you fully disagree, but you're afraid of the audience.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Respected jury, we've been hearing about the various...
We can't hear.
Okay. We've been hearing about the various ideas and what is going to come in the next 10 to 20 years time with regards to the EV vehicle utilization in UAE. Just I would like to emphasize one point which I'm still not clear. So Mr. Nasir, you told that government will not be that much into the recharging or the infrastructure programs as far as the EVs are concerned. So at the end of the day, it's not only the chargers which comes into place, the electricity generated by the government, that's the country, which plays a major role. If you see a simple example, by the increase of number of EVs, which is going to happen in UAE in the years to come, there will be a huge demand of electricity which is required to take care of it.
Especially for the fast chargers, you mean?
Any charger for that matter. Okay. See, a charger, currently on an average, a year, more than 200,000 cars are being registered.
In UAE?
In UAE. Sold,
electric?
rather.
Electric?
No, normal cars.
Okay.
So if we are going for a change, a 50%, that means 100,000 vehicle needs to be electric. So if you want a 100,000 vehicle to be electric from where we are going to source out this power. Thankfully, we have the Baraka power, the atomic power is there, but that has got its limitations with the 3 facilities, even after the 3 facilities getting into full acceleration. So, we are all talking about, it's nice to hear that people coming up with various ideas of chargers and all these things. But to utilize those chargers, even if those are in place, the amount of electricity anybody government side has calculated that, or what is it like? Because a plant like Baraka, it takes 10 years to be in place. And with more and more regulations of the world authorities, that atomic authority coming into play, it takes longer time. We are talking about an alternative fuel. We cannot burn fossil fuel to generate electricity.
But is this okay? So is this really what the government is really worried about? Because I think with the electricity generated here in the UAE, let's not look at other Emirates. Let's look at Abu Dhabi, for example. We have the Baraka power plant, and then we have Masdar, who's generating enough amount of clean energy. We look at Mohammed bin Rashid, the solar sites as well. Do you think, let's say in the next 20 years, all this energy generated would not be enough for the future generations? Secondly, at least from an experience point of view, I don't think this is what the government is actually worried about. It's the technical know-how what they are worried about. It's not about whether we have sufficient amount of energy. We can always generate energy from different sources. Where in many cities in the UAE, many places are already generating clean energy from various sites. But I think what the government is actually not clear about is what the technical know-how behind it, making the right decision, making the right type of investment, making the right type of, standardizing the types of, everyone is calling. Why do we have the COP28 happening next year? We have all this buzz. Yes, we want to be clean. We want to be clean. But if we want to be clean, we have to all join hands and start having a clear national agenda for e-mobility or sustainable mobility.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So thank you, Joseph, from your side. Thank you.
Sarah, we have enough time.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to ask and walk away because that is a debate for you guys. If you change the aspect and told the government, here is the money.
Say it again.
If you showed the government the money, will they accelerate?
Would they what? Accelerate?
Accelerate the adoption for electric vehicles. If you said, here is $1 billion that you can make as a government.
If you as who? Who is
you as an investor, as an idea?
Define you. Like, I think you has to be defined. If you define you...
Well, you are the experts on the table here.
No, yeah, but you see, if you, it depends on the you.
If you came with a solution
yeah.
that the government is making money
yeah.
out of the electricity and the investments, and it's go back to, do you think that the government will change its mind and policies to accelerate the adoption?
If I may take a shot at that as well, I think, first of all, let's also look at the current infrastructure, right, which is oil and gas based. There are, hundreds of thousands of people, job dependent on that current infrastructure. And I think it's the transition, right? I mean, Ahmed, I'll give it to you, back to you, but
No, I'll go back to your point. Oil and gas is not going to stop.
But it is.
It's not going to stop.
No, you're right. But my point is how fast this adoption from oil and gas to electrical vehicles will happen.
I'm being very specific here.
Right.
An electric vehicle charging infrastructure and policies.
Right.
If you showed the government that you can share the revenue, will they have a faster approach in adoption?
I see, okay.
But does the government actually regulate this? They have no clear regulations for it. When it comes to monetizing charging stations, there's no regulation. I have many examples. Look at Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah. There is no regulation whether you, as a private investor, can actually monetize. What will protect you as an investor? I think you know clearly what me as an investor, for example.
I know that you have a charger, a fast charger somewhere, and you're sharing that revenue with the government, right?
No.
You buy it from the grid and you sell it to the consumer, right?
No. The government does not allow you to sell energy. The government will they don't have a regulation.
Physically, you're taking from the grid, giving it to the electric car. How you say it, time, space, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
My question is, if you went instead, see, this is the reason why you went to that renaming of the service.
Yeah.
If you actually came and you say, you sell it for 1,
Yeah.
I'll give you 2, I don't think so you will rename your service anymore. Because for the government, I'm making money that I can put back to the infrastructure.
Well,
That's my valid point. Do you think that will accelerate or not?
interesting perspective.
Maybe. I mean, we've tried it also, with BIA, and in many cases, it's not in government's, best interest to have an additional, front in operating, charging station. It's more of, I think, it's not. Frankly speaking, we tried with many utility providers. They have no interest in this, and they always put the blame. We don't have a clear strategy. We don't know. Should we do it? Should we not do it? Should we invest? Should we not invest?
And this is the reason I'm saying show them the money and they'll come. All they want is money.
Yeah, but no, Faris, I think you are formulating the question to get a specific answer, which we don't have.
They want to make financial contribution on successful investments.
Yeah.
And for them, it doesn't make sense. I give you example of DIWA. They deployed 100 charger, no faster than them in Dubai. But they're all in DIWA premises because they don't want NOCs from other government entities. So it is, it's not ideal. What I'm saying here, all the government wants, from me, you, and everybody else, even from the private sector, is show me the money. That's it. You show the money, they'll come. They will happy give you whatever you want. All they need is a bank guarantee and a check. And you meet the safety, obviously. That's it.
Thank you for an interesting perspective. Appreciate it. Sarah, we are out of time, I guess. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Panelists, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.